Hi, this is Sir Flobojan Thunderhammer.
And I'm King Cabbage Tidehammer.
And this is WAK. We got a couple of serious ones under our belt.
Slept with the king.
And you become the champion day one and walk out.
I'm surprised your beards didn't get Velcroed together.
Explain that. You have to explain.
I haven't a clue.
That's why.
Some sort of LARP thing. I survived that. I'm not going to murder you.
Baronet Vidalia is a newcomer to Amtgard whose star is quickly on the rise. She has attended to her 8th Order of the Dragon in just under 2 years in the game. Blessed with the gift of a fresh perspective, today we'll talk to her about what drew her to Amtgard, her experiences as a new player in both the arts and sciences and in local leadership. Welcome, Baronet Vidalia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
No one could see you wave.
What do you say we make this one a kind of a relaxed fit, yeah?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
We got a couple of serious ones under our belt. We're all sitting here around a table with some McDonald's sweet teas, Cokes,
Diet
whatever
Coke.
we got. Diet Coke, okay. I'll start out. I got a question for you. You've been in the game for about 2 years now?
2 years in October.
How did you get into the game? I know from talking to you before that you had actually come out a long time ago, but tell me a little bit about that first experience and then what drew you back.
Okay, so I first played Amtgard back in high school. It was around 2008 when Cabbage and I went to high school together. Mystic Glade used to practice at the same park that I had soccer practice at, and I would run laps while you guys would swing foam. And so I'd always watch and be super jealous of you guys. And I saw Cabbage out there and asked him about it, and he agreed to take me out. He gave me this tunic that I still have. It's that green one I wear.
Yeah.
And I think you and Subway and Zeb were there, and I can't remember if anyone else was.
You remembered the important people.
Yeah, but I started coming out again in 2018, and what really piqued my interest, I came in October, but what really drew me back to the game, and you can see in the orc that this is when my attendance really picks up, was immediately after your knighting. It was the first time I'd ever seen a kingdom level event, and it was my friend's knighting. And so it was really a unique experience to have. I think I am one of the only people who really loves court.
No, there's some out there. There is some out there.
I just I really like the celebration of court, the way that everyone was packed into the, is it called the murder barn?
Yeah, the Cumberland Center, an old event site that we used to use, which was lovingly nicknamed the Murder Barn.
Yeah, I remember we were cheering for everyone in the murder barn well into dusk, and so celebrating everyone's accomplishments and fighting, eating, cheering, drinking. I feel like that's really what drew me in.
Now, be honest. Was it actually the big sloppy kiss that Duffer planted on Sir Flo in the buffeting line?
It might have had to do with
Okay,
Sir Duffer's kiss.
Yeah, that was an experience.
I'm surprised your beards didn't get Velcroed together.
Yeah,
it's almost better to just get punched, right?
Nah, I love Duffer. Yeah, it's funny. So one of my first events was actually a knighting as well, Sir Chohag, when we went down to Florida, and that's really one of the things that endeared me to the game as well was the Kingdom of Neverwinter, where he was knighted. They went the whole 9 yards, right? Big court, huge proceeding. Cho was really well liked in the kingdom. He had a lot of people from out of kingdom come and visit him. That was the event that Sir Sparhawk and several other people came to.
Oh, wow.
It's funny. It's funny how much of an impact that first knighting can have on someone, and their take on the game. But yeah, that was definitely. I was in and interested before that, but that was really when I got drawn in. Was seeing that the first time and going. For me, I was like, man, I'd like to be a knight someday. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, they give you a real sword and everything. Why wouldn't you?
or a real axe.
Or 2 real axes.
Or 2 real axes, yeah.
Shout out Patches, right? That was really cool.
It really was. I think that that those were made by someone that was on Forged in Fire. He has a friend that was on the show. I don't think they won, but I'm almost positive that he said that those came from someone that was on the Forged in Fire show.
Of course he knows that guy, right? Like I'm jealous, but at the same time, totally unsurprised. No, actually, your knighting is also because I took a break from the game. I had my son, and I decided I didn't have time for Amtgard anymore, and also I was trying to get a real job and kind of get my life together. And heard you were getting knighted, had to be there, and that's also what got me back into the game. And it was weird to take a break when we were a principality and then come back when we were a kingdom. That was kind of, we can make our own knights now. Because before it was one of the running jokes when I left the game was like, hey, don't call me back until Donnie gets knighted, right? Till Sir Darko now, then just Squire Darko, I believe. Don't call me back until he gets knighted. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, the kind of a follow up to that. So you came in and we hadn't been a kingdom for very long,
right?
When you were coming in,
Was it 2017?
Yes.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah.
I think so you don't really have the perspective of what I'm going to call the hard times. Like when we were a principality and there was only 20 or so people coming to an event, you've gotten to see what kind of a more polished version. And of course, we're trying to get better at it. What's something that you really, really like at the events for Winter's Edge? Something that, if you've gone to a couple of smaller events at parks too, so I'll include those in there as well. This isn't just kingdom level events. What's something that really draws you to stuff like that?
I really like seeing all of my friends that are outside of my home park and getting to fight them. That's the best part. But I also really like the larger scale battle games that are available at events. One of my favorite was at an event that I don't think either of you went to. It was the Fall Coronation last year. And Clover did this really cool battle game called the Siege of Carthage. And he had these walls set up that you had to blast through with bombs. And you had a defending team and an attacking team. And that was really fun. So,
yeah, the battle games where it's at for us, it is really one of the only things that distinguishes us from some of the other Boffer games is that battle game and class element that we have.
Yeah, everything else is just a militia ditch, basically, is what we would call it here.
Yeah, it's our version of a militia ditch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that we have some more questions for you, and this something that you said kind of dovetails in. You were talking about liking to visit some of these other parks and see some of the things that they're doing there. Cabbage mentioned this in your intro, but you have received 8 dragons. You're just about 2 years into the game now. How did that happen? Walk me through what's going on with that.
Whose fault is this?
Yeah, well, especially too because part of your time has been spent in this going on 6 months now, I think, of COVID that we've had, which is so you not only are you a newer player to the game, but you also have kind of this unique situation that you've been living in. And I think that Cabbage wanted to ask you a little bit about this later, but I know that you've been extremely active online during this time as well. So what does that look like? How did you take your path to get to 8 where you are? And what kind of advice do you have for anyone who is kind of still in the hunt on those lower orders?
Okay. Well, I believe I was able to get 8 dragons in 2 years because I slept with the king. So
Yeah, no,
I wasn't the king. Hey, I wasn't the king for like a year and a half of that. Okay.
Well, then that was a lot of awards to go out.
Wait, hold on. Did you sleep with the other king?
no.
Yeah, no.
Better not.
Yeah.
Better not.
I don't remember who the other king. Oh, Jade. Jade was
Jade and Anomaly.
an anomaly. Yeah,
We had a tumultuous. We had Jade, Anomaly, and Teflon in a span of about 6 months.
We
Me
did.
too. Yeah.
Jesus.
For legal reasons, all of this is a joke.
Right. So, but for real, 8 dragons. I did give you one of those. I'll assume responsibility. But the other 7, then how do you get to that point?
Okay. So, realistically, and not jokes, I entered every ANS competition that I could get my hands on. I entered several at Radiant Valley, several at Kingdom level. I even traveled to enter ANS competitions held by other parks back when we could travel. And one of the main things that I've gotten awards for is not even for competition work. It's that I really take the initiative and put myself out there making like knighting gifts or scrolls or things like that. So, you don't have to just make competition work. You can do whatever as long as you're being proactive and putting yourself out there. And then particularly during COVID, the digital ANS is really good for my set of skills. It's not like with armor or sword making or anything like that, where you really should be able to like pick up the piece and look at it. I do 2D arts, so they photograph really well, and so I think that's part of the success that I've had in online competitions. And then the most important part is that I have a really good vocal support network. So if you see someone creating or serving or leading, you really should put in those awards, because I'm really lucky in the sense that people don't take my work for granted. It might be because I'm new, but I know a lot of people are working hard and just aren't getting those awards put in.
Yeah, this is a thing that comes up pretty consistently, is just filling out those award recs, putting them in. Taking advantage of the process that's there for people to get awards. But something else you said actually, I think was really good. And you mentioned the idea of giving things out as knighting gifts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really cool thing to do, not only because you get to, let's be honest, you get to kiss a little ass, but you also get to give something to someone who's going to be extremely grateful for the gift, and you get to give it in an environment where everyone can see it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's taking advantage of the situation. I think that's a really smart way to do it, because it is something that gets put out there that people get to see, and it's a very formal environment anyway. So I think that's a really cool suggestion, and I think it's something that I wish we would do for our knights more often. Give them more cool things to celebrate their knighting. And
the first 2 gifts I did, they weren't scrolls, they weren't anything that was used in the ceremony. It was just a gift to give to the knights, because I think they're cool. If I can ducktail for a moment and talk about Flo's gift, it was my first event.
Which was awesome, by the way. Well, if you're watching this on YouTube or a visual version of it, we'll put it up on screen now.
Yeah, we'll edit it in, and it's actually, if we can be really candid, it's sitting on the living room wall in Flo's living room.
It is, yeah. I hung it up on my wall.
Well, Flo's knighting was my first event, and I'd never seen a knighting before. And I remember I was working on Flo's scroll. I was like, gift. I was like, Flo, it seems like knightings are really cool and really important in the game, and I know he's worked super hard, so I'm going to make him a gift. And then I drew it, and I sent a picture to Sir Gillen, and he was like, oh, do you want me to add you to Sir Flo's knighting gift group? And I was like, his what? And he was like, yeah, people give out gifts for knightings. And I was like, oh, good.
Yeah, there's always the assumed gifts, right? There's usually the belt and the spurs and the scroll and everything else. But yeah, the gifting groups are pretty cool, and it's always fun to be in one to see what people are getting. I'm in a couple right now, and I'm it's really hard not to tell, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the just again to hit on a conversation that we had earlier. That's like instant goosebumps. There is the ceremony that I saw when they called Cho up, and they did this as part of mine, and I think it's part of Neverwinter standard practice, but they have the roll that they read off as they're handing out the gifts. This white belt represents the light against the darkness. Right. The spurs represent your travel, or that your travel will never stop. I don't remember the script off the top of my head, but man, anytime I hear that is instant goosebump territory for me. It's such an amazing thing to see to see somebody, getting recognition for some of the work that they've put in and being recognized by their peers. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. And I love seeing when other people are awarded with knighthood as well. Yeah.
Sorry. It was the goosebumps.
Yeah, that's what
and
does
the
it.
vape. It was the vape as well.
Yeah, also the vape that we're ripping. Well, hey, so something that I always kind of want to pull out of people in any situation, whether it's work or whether it's Amped Guard. You're relatively new. I mean, 2 years in October. And there's this, when you first start, you always have this kind of unique viewpoint. Everything's kind of fresh and new. And over time, you lose that. We call it being jaded. But you can call it whatever you want to. But with your, I guess I'm going to call them newbie goggles. With your newbie goggles as a brand new player, what's the game like for you? Are there parts of the experience that you think could be better? Or things that are working great that you really liked coming into the game?
So a few of the things that I really enjoy is how novel everything still is. Like everything still feels fresh. Everything still feels new. Every time I visit another park or event, I'm seeing new ways of battle gaming and respawning and fighting that I've never seen before. And so that's really fun. Also, ANS and Feast. Every time I participate in ANS tournaments, there's always like new ways of making armor or swords that I haven't even considered before. So all of that is really fun as far as like the novelty of the game. So that's what I really like about it. As far as some of the negatives go, I think that new players, like really new players, can struggle with how intimidating a 72-page rule book can be.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times players feel like they have to know all the rules and read the entire book and all of that jazz before they take field. But no, you can just go out and swing foam and people will help you along the way.
Well, and if I can cut in here for just a moment too, to all of the experienced players out there, when you're in the heat of the moment in a battle game, it's really easy to get frustrated if you see someone that like doesn't immediately react to your spell that you've cast or doesn't immediately call their shot in a way that you think that they should. But you don't know if that person is new at the time, and they may just, it's not that they're trying to screw you over in some way, right? It could just be that they don't quite understand what's going on yet. So we get used to it because in general you adapt pretty quickly as a new player to what's going on, and everybody has their own coping mechanisms. Like some people will just step out and go, I don't know what's happening, right?
Right.
Am I dead? I'm dead. No, I'm not dead. Oh, I'm frozen. Okay, I'm frozen, everyone, just in case you're wondering. But just be patient. Don't assume malice where inexperience is a perfectly good explanation.
Yeah, we're hitting each other with foam bats. Let's not take it too serious. Like, it's a great game, but especially at your local park level, if it's a newbie coming out for the day, don't get super mad.
Does the competitiveness get to you as a new player sometime?
Not me personally, but I know a lot of new players who are negatively impacted by the competitiveness, especially the field at Radiant Valley. We tend to be very proficient in stick, so it can be discouraging sometimes.
We have a lot of experienced players at Radiant Valley. It's, as you mentioned, it's the old Mystic Glade crew, and then on top of that, we also have a whole lot of alpha type personalities.
We got at least 6 knights, right?
Do we?
We've got you, Sir Gillen, Sir Darko. We have Sir Duffer. Am I missing anybody? I feel
We're
like
going to be having Gun and
Sir
Bunch.
Gun and Sir Bunch very soon. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
we often take for granted the game mechanics and body mechanics that we all have learned being in the game for a while, and especially the body mechanics. That's a really wild thing to have to learn, especially when you look at how much sword fighting people see in traditional media, right? You see Aragorn swing his big two-handed sword and it takes a guy in half, and then your foam, your 40-inch foam boffer just nicks my elbow. And there is a disconnect there if you're new, where you think like that needed to really come in, right? No. This is a lightest touch LARP. So, it takes a while to adjust to that. And I think that's something that we at RV especially are really, we take advantage of, and we expect new people to as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when I joined, they always referred to it as your clock, right? Like it takes some time for the shot clock to work. And I mean, there was a group of us that were getting together. I think there was 4 of us that got together over at your house just a little while ago, and we were doing some fighting and talking Vidalia through some of just some of the basics. And this is one of those, reiterate, practice sort of things. And she was soaking it up really well. But it's been so long that you lose touch with the fact that it takes time sometimes to kind of get that together.
Sorry, were you?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
There was, when I first started, so this is in 2007, 2008. When I first started, my first couple of weeks out at Park, I got to play a class that I don't know if it was ever an official rulebook class or if it was something we had, but we called it Raider. And essentially it was Barbarian, but you got 2 immunity bubbles. So you could basically slough 2 things before you started taking shots. Yeah. And so one of the other things with that was you were immune to magic. And it was specifically reserved for your first 2 times out at Park, I believe. And it was specifically for new players. So we had a newbie come who doesn't understand all the magic. Hey, you can play a Raider and you can get out there and do something. And I don't feel like our game has that. Like, I feel like we've simplified a lot of the magic, but it would be cool to have a class made specifically for newbies.
Yeah, we house ruled a lot of stuff back then. I think that we also had it where after your first 2 times, you weren't affected by magic until the caster explained what was going on. So there was it put the onus on the casters, right? They would sit there and go, hey, I'm going to be hitting you with an ice ball. This is what it looks like. This is what it does. This is how you take it, sort of thing. But I think it helped. I think that it got people to learn the magic system faster. What's been the hardest part for you, Vidalia? Like coming in, you said that you really liked the battle games. Has it been the interactions of class or magic in the battle games? Is it anything to do with like the stuff outside of battle gaming, and because you've dabbled a little bit in the politics as well,
right? So I think, as far as a new player on the field, some of the harder concepts for me to grasp are shot in motion, and when the plane shifts on a wrap that's in motion versus a like chop or a stab that's in motion. So any sort of Simo that way was difficult to grasp my head around. And then a lot of the spells and abilities interact in strange ways that aren't inherently intuitive. And so learning all of the intricacies of spell interactions, I still don't think I have that under my belt. So
it can be, I mean, I know that the rulebook committees have made some pretty good strides compared to what it used to be with standardizing language so that there's some kind of fire-based stuff for fire stuff. And if you're immune to flame, then you'll be immune to those things. But I'm a fairly experienced player at this point, and that's hard for me to grasp sometimes on the fly.
Right.
And so I assume that can be really tough for a new person as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a player in the game who can honestly say at some point that they haven't taken a shot that they weren't supposed to. Right? Like I get hit with some things sometimes and I go, okay, I'm dead. I'm going to walk. I'm dead. And then later on somebody goes, you're immune to whatever that was. And I'm like, I did know that. Yes, I knew that. Yes. And then with the shot in motion, the plane breaking rules, I was thinking about that as you were talking, and like, there's not a good way to explain it, because in my head, I was like, oh, well, it's when your wrist does this. And I was like, how do I describe that with human words that another person hearing this could understand? I can't.
Yeah, that was Sir Stinkfoot. I remember him making fun of someone who was trying to talk to new people that had been in about your length, and the person was explaining how breaking shots work and explaining how shot in motion works, and the description at the time was, he's like, there's an audio element to it, right? You listen for the Fwack, and that can help you distinguish. And Pat's kind of shaking his head and talking to himself, Fwack, that's how we're going to break down shots in our game.
Wait till he hears the name of our podcast.
Yeah. He's never gonna. He'll come up with his own name for it. I'm sure.
You're right.
So we touched on this, or I touched on this a little while ago. You've done a little bit with politics on a local level as well. You helped out on the kingdom level too. You were a scribe for Clover when he was prime minister. Is that correct?
Yes, and I am currently scribe for the sitting prime minister, Hunter Newbie, and I am also a assistant to the regent, which is Princess Teflon.
The assistant. Do you get more hats if you're or necklaces or something?
It's like the Dwight Schrute thing. It's like assistant to the regional manager.
Oh yeah,
you just get a mustard colored tie.
That makes sense. The Radiant Valley, which we are all at, has been more organized and less organized at different points in its history. It was definitely in a pretty deep state of disorganization when you came back from your one or two experiences when you were younger and started getting more involved. I know you've been doing a whole lot of outreach to Radiant Valley during COVID times when we're all online, and doing a lot of outreach to the rest of the community and inviting them to some of the things that you've been doing, just to kind of give Vidalia a shout out here. She's done quite a bit of online interviews with some of the knights and people around Winter's Edge, movie nights, organizing movie nights and stuff on the Discord and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about your process of making our park functional again.
Sure. So let me break it down into two different sections. We'll talk about pre-COVID and during COVID, because those are two totally different monsters. So if you are a monarch, I have some advice for you. The first thing is put in the work, because 100% of the outcome is based off of what you put into it. And if you want to see growth and success at your park, you need to start at that foundation, which is yourself, and just don't be afraid to get, elbows deep in there. Be proactive, take the initiative, and do things. The other thing is, don't be afraid to fail. I failed a lot of times, and I don't think people have really noticed, just because I keep going. But like my first status elevation didn't go through. I've had to cancel events. My cookbook for Amtgard totally failed to launch, but no one remembers me for those things because, like I said, I picked myself up and I kept going. And so now, Flo thinks of me for doing those like night Q&As and for reorganizing the park, and not for how I failed my status elevation. So just remember, do a lot, and don't be afraid if it all doesn't work, because if you're throwing a lot of things on the board, one of them's bound to stick. And then the last advice that I have for monarchs is that you are not solely the boss. Yes, you are ultimately the decision maker, but that doesn't really put you above your players. In fact, it puts you in service to them. And so you are going to be the foundation of your support structure and your social structure at your park. And so you should really think of yourself more as like a park mom or dad than a boss or a task manager. So that's my advice for monarchs. And then as far as actual park growth, I've broken it down also into 3 steps. The first is recruitment. So get players out there, invite your friends, put up flyers, post on Facebook, go to public places where people can see you, like our ANS we have at a game store that does like D&D and stuff. And so people can see us out there crafting. And then at Park, we have a location that's very visible from the road. So we have a lot of walk-ups. And then once you have players out on your field, follow up with them. So once they leave, you should have their mundane name by entering them into the org. And so just shoot them a message on Facebook, let them know how great it was that they were out that day, and then give them the information for your next park meeting. Especially if they were out at a park day, you want to give them the information for the A&S night so they can really experience the different elements of the game. And then once you have them at like an A&S night or a tournament or anything that you can give them award for, recognize them at local level. And by then the hook is in and they'll keep coming back.
I like that park growth metrics are a whole lot like dating. Your text game after a good first date too, like, hey, I had a really good time. Me and some buddies are going to be getting together on Saturday down at this bar. Wondering if you'd want to come. It's just going to be a lot of friends and their SOs, but it works, right? It's we've heard this on, I think every single cast that we've done so far.
I know Kazan had very much the same advice. Yeah, I think he called it welcome, plan, promote, but
yeah,
the advice is very similar.
Yeah, make people feel welcome. Everybody wants to feel like they have a place to belong. Everybody wants to feel welcome, and a lot of us grew up in social situations at high school or even at college or something like that where we weren't necessarily the coolest kids on campus. So, yeah, just be patient and be promoting, I think, and listen and reach out. I think that those were the big talking points you have there, and I totally agree. It's I wanted to say this too earlier. I didn't want to interrupt you, but the advice that you gave to the local monarchs there is actually good advice all the way up. Though I stole this and have given this speech before, but if you are in this came from my knight's knight, Sir Tarjay said, if you're in a position above people, don't step on their heads. Don't push other people down an inch to raise or a foot to raise yourself an inch, right? Reach down and help people up. That is how you grow. That is how the organization as a whole gets better. And you were talking about several of the points that really helped that happen. So yeah, just advice not just to the local monarchs, but any future kings of Winter's Edge or Amtgard. I think that's really solid points to go by there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things you said that is relatively novel that we haven't heard before, but I think is absolutely important. You mentioned, I'm going to generalize and call it the curb appeal of your park. That is the location. That's how you look out on the field, right? It's curb appeal, like we're selling a car or something.
That's where I went to. Some nice spoiler and fenders on that one right there.
Yeah, exactly. But that is hugely important. That is one of the things that got me into the game. I mean, really, I had a friend who brought me into the game and who sort of forced me to come for a little bit. But seeing people out there, especially people in armor, people with pole arms, battle games happening, those things to me, when I would see that walking up to the field, it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be a good day. And I think the parks that have a good location, they are more likely to succeed just because of the volume of walk-ups they're bound to get. If your park is at the top of a hill behind a gate and you have to, all of these things. I mean, I'm very specifically talking about parks like Buccaneers Respite. I desperately want to see those parks to succeed because I love the people who are there, but their location is one of those things that I feel like might be holding them back. And
right,
I've talked to Ruben about this. I think he's still the monarch there, and it's hard to find a location where you can do this. But if you find a good spot, take it.
Right, that was one of the things that drew me in at Mystic Glade was I would run laps around the field and I would jog slower when I got to the parts where I could see the like tree, where you guys used to play at.
It's a kind of the top of a little hill and there's a bunch of trees. And if you step the wrong way, you roll down into a soccer field or down into a dirty pond full of disc golf discs that people lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would slow to a jog so I could watch you guys fight. and then continue like my sprint around the track once I had passed out of sight. So anywhere where you can be seen is going to attract more walk-ups, and more walk-ups equals more players.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, this is a great excuse to get really good garb, you guys. It will grow the game. When you see people in really cool stuff, I mean, it's a draw, you know? Hey, quick question. Why were you jogging at all?
Soccer practice.
Oh, that's lame. Never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then if we want to circle back around to the COVID part of things.
Mm-hmm.
You had more. Yeah, that's right.
This is my podcast now. I'm going to talk.
All right, I'm going to go. Bye, guys. I'm just going to head out. Leaving the room.
So during COVID, I wasn't sure how long it was going to last, but I didn't want... I kind of looked at it the same way that you would look at winter death, where people start to lose interest because there's less and less opportunities for interaction. And so I really wanted to reinforce our social links and give people the ability to learn and still advance online. And that can be done in the form of ANS nights, where we all get together and craft. Discord and Zoom are two apps that people are using, which allows you to do group video calls, so you can all see what each other are working on and give each other advice, keep each other company. There is the night Q&As that I did, which had Sir Duffer, Sir Flo, Sir Darko, and Sir Gillen. And it was unique because Radiant Valley has one of each night, but so we had that to our advantage, and they each gave like a little lecture and then Q&A time about their respective expertise. And then we also had some people come in who weren't knights, who had just done service on the kingdom level. I think we had Cade and Vishirin, Alinia, Cinnamon, others, I'm sure. I'm sorry if I've forgotten you. There are a lot. But they all gave lectures about like how to do feasts, how to do battle games, how to be a paragon of your class. And so those were really informative for the group. And then we're also planning some more. And then just to kind of make sure that everyone is still able to like socially interact and everything like that, we've also had movie nights. Big shout out to Kay and to Juniper, who have been doing the streaming for those. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned Duffer, and he's come up a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been approached for, very early into the game, you were approached for a couple of belts, and I know Duffer was at least a few of those.
He can spot talent.
Yeah, he could spot talent, absolutely. But a lot of people approach you, not just Duffer. So what was that like, being approached by basically everyone who could give you a belt for a belt? What was that like? And then I know you ultimately ended up taking a belt from Lexi. And Lexi is a fantastic crafter, so I understand kind of why you took that belt. But what drove the decision to turn those other belts down until you did get the offer from Lexi?
Right. So if I can be totally candid, it was actually really annoying. I think I got 13 different belt offers. And that's not to say that I'm not grateful, and all of the belts that I were offered were from really great people. And I do want to work with those people, just maybe not in a belted family. The reason why it was annoying was that it was a bit overwhelming as someone new to the game. I had no idea what belted families were. So the first belt offer I got, I then spent like 3 days doing research about what belted families are, the way they function in the game, the political and social ramifications of joining a belted family,
Right.
all that sorts of things. And then every time I got an offer for a belt, and this is something that anyone should do if they are being offered belts, is do a deep dive on the person offering you a belt. Because I've only been in the game for 2 years, and at the time that I was getting belt offers, I'd only been in the game for a year. So I didn't have the perspective about what this person had done in the game, what their interests were, what their reputation was. And so I would look into their Amped wiki, look into their orc, and then ask players that are surrounding them about them, but then also ask players from outside of their park, even
Right.
from if they're a particularly big name outside of Kingdom, and see what rumors or opinions exist about them that you might not be privy to just on the surface level.
Right. So this is one of those things where I think it's hard to say no to someone that you view as powerful, right? And in this game, knights and people who can give you a belt are, by definition, powerful. That we give them that power as a part of our game, and I think that goes back to that new player experience, right? Where you're a very new player getting approached for a lot of things that you don't know about. I think that's a huge part of the new player experience if it does happen to you. Do you feel like it might be more appropriate for someone who decides they want to be belted to approach the knight, or do you think the structure where knights or squires or whoever approaching you is appropriate?
I don't mind so much the structure being a knight or other belted member approaching someone for a belt, but I think that it's more intuitive and more productive to approach someone for a belt.
Okay.
Because you know what your goals are and who might best fit those goals. That's why I ended up declining a lot of the belts until Lexi's, because I want to be focused in ANS, and a lot of the belts that I were offered were more politics or service focused, which, you know, I'm still interested in, but that's not my passion so far in Amped Guard.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's so kind of a follow up to that, and this is maybe more this is more a question about Lexi than it is about you. But how do you think she would take it if we did her knighting on the podcast? So she didn't find out about it until she was listening to the podcast.
Okay, listen, we can make this happen. The cord for my MacBook is white. It's a belt now. Yes?
Yeah.
This is my MacBook's going to die. So, okay.
No, we've had
Lexi,
we've had a joke running for a long time that we're going to try and surprise her with a knighting. For those that don't know, Lexi has her masterhood. She is
Garber. Yeah, Master Garber.
She is not a knight. That is by choice. And I think that she has some really good reasons for not wanting to take that. I think it's a very interesting position that she chose to take, and one that you don't see very often. So all the respect to her for that. But we still like planning and plotting these different ways that we're going to belt. And as one of her belted line, I think that it would be important that we could blame you for all of this.
Yeah. Do you think you could fit inside of a cake?
Well, all of this is fine and dandy, but what are we going to do when Lexi assaults me for getting her knighted?
That's not my problem.
I don't see how this affects either of us.
That's a you problem.
I'm gonna need to enter the witness protection program.
There's no hiding from Lexi.
No.
So speaking of Lexi, I got a belt from her, and it was really satisfying. Lexi is one of the people that I look up to the most in the game. Don't tell her I said that.
We'll definitely cut this out.
I remember the first time Lexi came out to park, I sat down in the car afterwards and I look over at Cabbage and I was like, who is that girl with the shield with the face on it? And he was like, oh, that's Lexi. And I was like, she's a fucking badass.
Yeah. That's most people's first impression. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or she's terrifying, which two
Both,
sides,
yes.
same coin.
I love that tiki shield cover, the tiki face shield cover too.
But yeah, I remember really looking up to Lexi both in terms of combat and all of the like work that she does. She's not just great at sewing; she's also great at like painting and crafting other things. She'll say she's not good at painting, but she is. So,
we'll showcase on the YouTube side of things. We'll showcase some of her projects as we're doing this segment. Right, we'll show the shield she made and some of the tunics and things like that.
Listening to you and her argue over a purple color that you were adding to a piece that you were working on was, I mean, this was 2.5 hours that they went back and forth on this one particular color purple versus other colors or something like that. As someone who doesn't do painting or a lot of art, just endlessly amusing to me. Everybody finished their project, and I still think that you guys were in the middle of your argument at that time.
well, I was continuing to work with that purple as we argued. So
The decision was made. Yeah, as somebody who doesn't understand color, because I'm colorblind, like, yeah, that was a discussion that I just dipped right out of.
right. The other thing that Lexi constantly gives me crap for is my role in Amtgard politics. Every time I take a scribe position, she's like, "Don't do it."
I think she's a little bit right in that, but maybe for the wrong reasons. Like I think it's better to promote yourself in a more open way. But I believe, having known Lexi for a while, that her reasoning for having you do it is it's just not worth the effort.
Right.
And I think there's some truth to that. But I would like to see you actually, take on a role and own that role instead of just being the power behind the throne kind of thing. I think her heart's in the right place.
Sure.
Well, and after having served in several different positions for the principality and the kingdom too, I think that it's perfectly fine to have a scribe position or someone else that's helping you out. But remember, if you're the person that's in the main seat at that time, the reason that you have them is so that you can train your replacements. You can train up the next generation. It's not just to help you in the case of Prime Minister, which is what you were helping with most recently. And by the way, I'm not calling Clover out on this at all. This is a more generalized statement. Like, if this person comes in and all you're having them do is just enter stuff into Orc for you or something like that, then you're missing the point. This is to teach them how to fill that role when you have just had it up to here and you don't want to do it anymore. We have to be able to train up the next generation, or you can't complain when there's no one to replace you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want new blood in your game, you have to train them. And that's exactly what that position is for.
Well, if I can speak on that, that's why I didn't take the Prime Minister position. That's why I didn't run yet, is because I already committed myself to being regent at Radiant Valley and helping the monarchy team there. And I didn't want to step away from that role to pursue kingdom level office until I was sure that all of the groundwork that I've done at Radiant Valley doesn't just disappear because no one knows what to do.
It will.
That's fair. Do you think that your duties as scribe take away from the work you're doing as regent at Radiant Valley currently, or is it being done properly, whereas scribe you're not being tasked with everything, you are just in a learning role?
I do help out a lot as scribe, or at least I did with Clover, but that's not to say that he gave me too much work or was putting it all on me or anything like that. It was more I offered. And I don't think it's taking away from my role as regent, because at the end of the day, all of the work that I do as scribe is optional, and I can say, oh, I can't do this. I need to handle some work at Radiant Valley. So that's still going to be on your plate.
Yeah, and there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do in any of those positions. So there's plenty to be able to kind of parse out to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to Radiant Valley, at what point do you think you'll be able to step away and start actually chasing some of these roles?
Soon. I think that we have a lot of success in some of the roles at Radiant Valley right now. Z is doing an excellent job as Monarch. She makes a lot of great Facebook posts. She did excellent at giving out awards at our mid-reign. The only thing that I would look for from Z is taking more initiative. But I think the only reason that she hasn't done that so far is because as a first-term monarch, it can be hard to spot all of the things that need to be done. And
Right.
so it's just training that perspective so that she can do those things.
So you think that when Z is more in the saddle, you'll be safe to leave and start doing other things?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, and you can. I mean, you'll still be coming out to local park. There'll still be an opportunity to help out all of the people there too. But it can get really overwhelming if you're having to do all of those jobs. So again, you've done it right. You have people at the park. You have been passing on the things that you've learned from other people and you learned over the course of yours. And some of those things they'll be able to soak up, and some of them are just going to be things that they have to learn for themselves.
Right. Our prime ministers at Radiant Valley are also doing an excellent job. We had Red Baked Bean step in for pro temp, and now we've had Juniper step in as pro temp. And so Red Baked Bean was able to put together a document of all the unique monthly sign-ins and prep for the audit that is no longer happening. But she did the work, and she did it correctly. And then Juniper has put together a lot of fundraising documents for local park. And so I think they're really excelling at their job.
Are the two of you responsible for the growth of food-based names in Radiant Valley?
Okay, I was named Cabbage as an Austin Powers reference. It's a
You were.
really deep cut. Sir
were.
Gillen gave me that name. There's a bit in Austin Powers where he says, only two things frighten me, and one of them is nuclear war. And then,
Yeah.
what's the other one? Is carnies. They have tiny hands that smell of cabbage, so cabbage hands. So from that, we have Vidalia, and if you want to explain your nickname, go right ahead.
Okay, so I really like onions. I like onions so much. I order like extra onions. The way that I explain how I want my, sweet onion chicken teriyaki sandwich at Subway is put onions on it. Extra onions. No more than that. Put an excessive amount of onions. Think that you're putting on too many onions and keep going. So I eat so many onions that I smell like onions. And so I think it was you and Flo, both of you here, that decided, you should go by Vidalia because you smell like onions.
Yeah, it's because we were in a van coming back from an event, and it never smells great coming back from an event, but it smelled distinctly like onions the entire trip back.
Which isn't the worst thing. I mean, it's better than glove. It's better than the legion of unwashed masses that is normally an AmpGuard event.
Man, I don't like onions that much, apparently, because that was worse than glove. When I go to Subway, to use your story, when I go to Subway, I want an amount of onions where the person making my sandwich isn't actually sure if I want onions.
They just whisper onions near
I
your
just drag
sandwich.
an onion through the mayonnaise and then dispose of the onion. That's kind of where I'm at as a person.
Yeah. I don't go to Subway very much anymore. I kind of had a bad experience there.
So speaking of smelling like onions, at Symposium, I was really cold and I'm super paranoid about my hands because I do art. And Bunch is a radiator. And so Bunch was driving my van. We were making a Walmart run. It was me, Lexi, Bunch, and Oz. And Bunch is in the front seat and I'm sitting behind him. And so I shove my hands right into his armpits so they're nice and warm, which involves me putting my arms up at a 90-degree angle. And Oz goes, "Oh, Bunch, you smell so bad. It smells like onions in here." And Bunch and I both start laughing hysterically. And Oz goes, "What is it?" And Bunch goes, It's not me. That's Vidalia. That's why she's called that."
Jesus. You did that to me. You did that to me. I was asleep on my air mattress, and at some point in the night, I didn't even know this. This did not even wake me up. I don't know if Cabbage knows this story, but it's an AmpGuard event, right? You're packed in like sardines on air mattresses and whatever else you can fit on. And she shoves her hands between me and the air mattress at some point in the middle of the night. This doesn't wake me up. I wake up and start to roll over. Why are their hands just shoved under my side here? Vidalia, what are you doing? "Oh, I got cold."
Yeah, my fingers, they get cold. And so I just...
So we've told a couple of stories here now. What would you say is your funniest amp guard story up to this point? You haven't been in the game very long, but you've been to probably more events than most have in the time that you've been in. So you have to have collected at least one really great story.
So it was that October coronation, and I tell this story all the time, so you both have probably heard it, but I'll tell it again. I was drinking in the feast hall, and I think I had a whole bottle of wine, and then I staggered up to the feast hall, and Chops was making cinnamon rolls, and so I walk up to Chops, and I was like, "Hey, boy, let me help make some cinnamon rolls." And so he's like, "Sure, you can spread the butter." So I spread the butter on, and then I lick all my fingers. And then Chops smacks me on the head, and he's like, "Go wash your hands." And so I scrub my hands like a doctor, and then I walk back over and spread more butter on, and then lick all my fingers. And this goes on probably 5 or 6 times before Chops just shoos me out of the kitchen. The other thing that I was doing is Chops would get a beer, and he would set it down, and then I would drink it. And then he would go get another one and set it down.
Did he know?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you were kind of sneakily.
I don't think I could do anything sneakily at that point. And so eventually they shoo me out of the feast hall. And so I go to bed and climb up in the top bunk. And if you don't know this about me, I have somnambulism, which is sleepwalking. And so in this top bunk, I start to sleepwalk, but you know, I think it's a normal bed. So I just fall out of the top bunk and onto the radiator, which I pick up with my bare hands because I was convinced it was going to set the blanket on fire. So I pick it up with my bare hands and then look down at them, and I'm like, hot. And so I run outside to go run my hands under some cold water, and Anomaly is sitting by the campfire by himself. And this was... right before he was about to become king. So it was announced that he was going to be coronated, but he hadn't actually, put the crown on yet, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, the king. And then I run back into my cabin and I grab my petition for barony status. And I approach Anomaly while I'm so drunk I can't hold my head up. And
and semi-sleepwalking with burnt fingers.
Yes. And I'm like, "Can you please look over my petition for barony and make sure that the numbers are right?" And then I hiccuped really loudly. I was convinced that Anomaly thought I was an idiot for like the rest of his reign. He's probably right, but
Right. So we're going to kind of wrap things up here. And I'm going to continue to abuse that. I call them newbie goggles. I'm going to continue to abuse that privilege for as long as you have them. Who is a player that you've either heard about or that you've interacted with that you think would be a cool person to have on the podcast? And then as a follow-up to that, how do you think we can get Lexi on the podcast?
Yes, I do suggest Lexi. I also suggest Warlord Gunn. And then Saint O'Banion would be pretty cool.
O'Banion's a cool recommendation. I'll be honest with you and say we already have Warlord Gunn on our list.
Okay.
Lexi, if you can convince her to come, would be really cool. Explain to us just really quickly who O'Banion is.
O'Banion is a knight. I think he's got 2 or 3 belts. But what's particularly interesting about him is that he is a master mask, which is what you get for role-playing.
How many of those are? It's just he's got to be the only one, right? Because I've never heard of those.
I think he's the only one.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard that. O'Banion, Gunn, and Lexi, who was probably named. The
Yeah.
You've been called out. We'll be contacting you to see if you want to come on the podcast.
So something we've been doing kind of as a running gag, but I kind of like the tradition. And I think Sir Kazan sort of set the pace with this, but we're letting everyone who comes on name the episode. So we tried having people name the podcast itself, but I think WAK is just going to stick. So we're gonna keep WAK. But
They
what
were
would
bad names.
They were terrible names. Sorry, Sir Kazan. But I do like the idea of naming the episode. So this is your episode. What do you name it?
Should it follow the WAK
No,
format?
it doesn't have to. You can
No
name
one
it
else
anything
has.
you want.
Yeah,
Oh.
if you have planned this and you already have something, that's awesome. But no one else has followed that trend.
Okay, so I either want to call it Fwack
Okay.
or White Onions and Kale
White onions and kale.
to follow the WAK.
Okay. Those are both awful. How do you spell Fwack? Just so I know.
FWACK.
Is that
Yes,
it?
yes.
Fwack Fwack.
Okay.
You know that used to be an event.
Oh, really?
There used to be an event called Fwack that was 5 weeks after Clan.
Oh yeah.
And it was
Okay.
held 5 weeks after Clan, of course. I can't remember what kingdom did that now. I think it was maybe the Iron Mountains did it.
I think
I don't know.
so.
We'll have to
do
look
think
that up.
Okay, so we've got Fwack, and then we have the other one more time.
White Onions and Kale. WAK.
Well, there's an O in there because onions. So it's woke. Our options are Fwack or woke.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wait for the episode to come out, and you'll get to know what we went with.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for being on. This has been a lot of fun. I love hearing from someone that is relatively new and getting that kind of fresh perspective. I know we've touched on that several times, but you lose that as you're in the game longer, and it's an unfortunate thing. But people like you are what breathe life back into the game for older players like me, and it's really just been it's been a joy watching you kind of come into yourself in the game and learn where you want to be and what you want to be doing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the flattery.
We'll see you guys next week.